Hello and welcome to the podcast. You're listening to Be Uncluttered. I'm Tara Tuttle and with me is Rebecca Mazzino, and together we are going to help you on your journey to a life free of clutter.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. So today I have Karly Nimmo with me, who is a podcasting superstar, and now she's going to laugh at me saying that. And she is a business coach and all-round honest person. And I have her in today because she did a post on social media about her availability to be a podcast guest. And she mentioned the topic of going grey, and my ears just pricked up because I thought, wow, that is a really interesting topic that will affect a very large proportion of our listeners. And I thought it actually, on the surface, doesn't seem to be much about being uncluttered, but as soon as you think about it for even a second more, you're like, oh, okay, it is. So I was like, I immediately messaged Karly and I said, ooh, I want to get you on. We're going to chat about the whole going grey thing.
Cool. I have to say, it has led to a very uncluttered shower and a very uncluttered hairdressing schedule. So that's two things.
Yep. So there we go. We've already ticked the boxes. So if you can give us a bit of a background, it was a while ago now that you started the process of going natural, and which involved going grey because that was the natural colour of your hair and what it had become. So how long were you going grey for before you actually decided to do it naturally?
So interestingly, we are just about to hit the 3-year anniversary. So that is happening for me, my last colouring happened at the end of October. The year I turned 40, so that was 2017.
Okay.
I had been going grey. I think I found my first grey when I was 15 years old. And it's interesting because I remember being at the hairdresser, getting a haircut, and the hairdresser being really horrified that I had this grey hair and pulled it out. And then I remember telling my best friend's mum that I'd had a grey hair, and she was really horrified. And, and so, I don't know, it was an instant, well, there's something wrong with having grey hair. And my dad was fully grey by the time he was 21. And I probably was, but I coloured my hair for, 25 years.
Okay. Yeah, my dad, when my mum met my dad, he was 21 and he had a grey strip at the front if he pulled his fringe upwards. Interestingly, I saw you do a post where you'd pulled your fringe upwards and you're actually not grey on the underside of your fringe, but that was where he was grey, on the underside of his fringe. And he was completely grey by his early 30s. And then completely white, by 40. And I sort of have that in my family, but I haven't really got any. I've got a few grey hairs now, and I'm a couple of years older than you. I'll be 45 at the end of the year. And being blonde, I think it's sort of not as noticeable even if I did have, a couple of grey hairs. But my hairdresser, who was also a friend of mine, she used to curse me for not having any grey hairs. And it was as if it was sort of, something I'd done well, like this great achievement I'd done well. I'm like, well, it's kind of just genetic. But, so she would sort of say, oh, you still haven't got any grey hairs. And she found one once, so about 5 years ago. And she said, I found a grey hair. Do you want me to pull it out? And I said, no. I said, I want to keep it. I've been looking forward to getting grey hair because I've got such fine, limp hair. And I had this idea that if I get some grey hairs that it will bulk up my hair somewhat because grey hairs are kind of, known to be coarser.
Thicker.
Yeah. And she said, oh, well, I was just going to pull it out to show you. And I'm like, no, I don't, because it was at the back of my head. And I was like, no, just leave it there. I want more of them. And she sort of just laughed and she said, oh, you don't know what you're wishing for. And I was like, I actually do. And now I can see them when I pull my hair up in a ponytail. I can see the shiny little sparkly ones coming through on the sides. So it's quite a bit exciting for me. But yeah, it's sort of, again, everyone sees it as a bad thing. And yeah, it's really interesting.
And so many people have a lot of stuff around it, I think I certainly did. It took me, I wanted to go grey probably from around my 30th birthday, and it took me until 40 because everyone was telling me you're too young. You're too young, it'll make you look old. There's just a lot of stuff, but also the transition can be quite brutal and long. You know, it took at least, I would say, 2 years for it to fully grow out, and I cut it kind of shortish just to my shoulders to kind of get rid of it.
Speed it up, yeah.
Yeah, to speed it up a bit. And before that I'd always dyed my hair either really dark brown, black, and then maybe a couple of years before I thought I'd always said I'll, stop dyeing my hair when I'm 40. And so I had a bit of fun with bright red. And the bright red meant that I had to bleach, I had to have my hair bleached in order to have the red stick, or even stay on. So like before so what I unknowingly did was made the process less harsh for me because the hair was already lighter. And with lighter hair, the transition is a little bit more gentle than like having like a black. If I was still black, oh my God, it would have been a very different experience.
Yeah, like a white strip down the center of your head as it grows.
Yeah, right. And just like kind of growing. It would have been a much harsher transition. But having like the red hair was actually a big catalyst for it, because though I really loved I was like bright red, and I really loved it, but it meant that I had to go, it cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars every time I'd go to the hairdresser, because she'd have to bleach the roots and then colour it. Yeah, and then I'd have to use like a coloured shampoo, like a red shampoo. I couldn't swim because it would kind of seep out, and I couldn't just wash my hair with normal shampoo. So the process of me even washing my hair involved, putting on plastic gloves so that my fingers didn't get stained, and my shower was always a shade of pink, and my towels were all ruined. So from that perspective, like going grey actually did simplify a lot for me, because I could then just not think about, my hair colour and and now I don't have to go to the doctor, the hair doctor, go to the hair doctors every 3 weeks to have, the roots done. It was a very expensive process, and also really time consuming, 3 hours at the hairdresser for, every time you go is a lot. So
and it's so expensive. Like if you think
so
about
expensive.
all of the money, I've always been a low maintenance person, and I still remember my hairdresser friend telling me off for doing my own foils. Because I'm like, I've tried DIY with everything, and I did my own foils, and she said, Rebecca, not even I would do my own foils, dude, just don't. And then she looked at it and she said, actually, you did quite a good job. And I have always been quite good at DIY, and so I always lean to that, because I hate spending the money. I'm a bit cheap when it comes to that. And I just think like some women have told me that, every 4 to 6 weeks they have to spend $300 on their hair. And I'm like, I don't spend $300 in a year on my hair. Like,
well, I don't now, but back then it probably was $200 to $300 a month it would cost me. Yeah.
Well, that's complicated.
And that's a lot.
Yeah. So as you went through this process, what were you scared of? Like, you wanted to do it for 10 years, so you didn't. What were you scared of? Or was it fear, or was it something else?
Yeah. It was a bit. I was afraid of the judgment of others. I was afraid that that my hair would be ugly, because this is the thing, right? People always say to me, like it's interesting, because people who long to go grey, like I did, have all of these reasons why they can't. It's like, oh, the transition is too ugly. My hair isn't the same as yours. Like yours is really, whatever they think my hair is. Mine is like patchy and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, until you grow it out, you actually have no idea, right? Like you don't know what it's going to look like. And I think that's the hardest part to grasp is, like, I don't know. When you go to a hairdresser, often you'll go with a picture and be like, make me look like this. Or you have an idea in your head, like, I want to go brown, or I want to go red, or I want highlights. And you have an idea of what that looks like, because you can dictate it to a certain extent. You can be like, hey, I want my highlights here and I want, whatever. But with grey, it is whatever it is. You've got no control. Yeah. So from that perspective, it can be really daunting, because you just don't know what it's going to be like. And because it's such a long process, it's a really long commitment to just grow it out naturally and be okay with it perhaps looking a bit shit for quite a while, So those things, I feel like that they were definitely barriers to me. But also having had 20 years of people telling me, or 25 years of people telling me, you're going to look old, was also something that, you know, I thought, oh, well, maybe that's true. Maybe people will think I'm older than I am because of my hair. And that was definitely something in my 30s that was a consideration. But then I kind of reached 40 and I was just like, oh, you know.
It doesn't, and this is the thing. I think we get to a point where we're like, well, what's wrong with being old? You know,
right.
And we have this, society's always, you know, oh, you mustn't look old. How dare you look old? Old is bad. It's like, actually, old is awesome. And
it's a privilege.
Look, I mean,
you know, like not one that
privilege.
We get to.
Yep.
Yeah. Not everyone gets to live
it.
till they're 40, 50, 60, 70, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. And I actually saw a post once by a woman who was naturally going grey. She would have been in her early 30s, and some troll, of course, some keyboard warrior told her that it made her look old. And she said, I have a serious disease and I'm lucky to actually be 30. And I find the idea of looking old to be really exciting because I might not get to be really old. And, you know, and I think she would have shut this woman up in a hurry. But that's the thing, you know, it's a privilege. And as we get older, we're so much better. And, you know, the 20-year-olds won't believe us, but we are better, you know, in our 40s, and we know this. And we know that we're better versions of ourselves than what we were back then, and that we have a lot to offer. And so being ashamed of being old is something that I think it's great if we can start to celebrate that a little bit more instead of, you know, shying away from it so much.
Be afraid of it. Yeah, I think there's part of it that's kind of natural because, you know, I don't know if it's natural or if it's just our conditioning in the Western world, but we are kind of taught to fear death, you know, and the older that we get, potentially the closer we're getting to it. So from that perspective, I understand the fear of getting older, but what I don't understand is particularly women's preoccupation with looking, you know, like a 20-year-old in their 60s. That I can't get my head around. And no judgment to people who you know, want to do injectables and all that kind of jazz. It's, you know, it's not for me, and you know, and I guess it is for some. But like, I think we have a societal problem when there's that much pressure for us to stay young.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? I'm actually really happy with being a 40-something-year-old woman in a 40-something-year-old body, aging. You know, I'm getting the jowls. I'm getting all the bits that go with aging. And sometimes I think to myself, oh, maybe I could do something about that. But that isn't who I am, you know, like it. And also I want to stand for, you know, I don't know. I want to age, and the more I age, I want to become more visible, and I want to, you know, be I don't know, not necessarily a beacon, but you know, like I want to be proud of who I am, and I've lived a big life, a really big life. So if that's going to show, who cares? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm the same. I do the same thing. I sort of, and when we get to our 40s, that's when we can actually afford all of the things like the injectables and stuff, you know. So people in their 20s, they're just, you know, they're not paying off their mortgage because they're getting their lips, putting money in their lips instead. But, you know, we can afford it. So I've kind of looked at it, I've gone, oh, maybe I could get rid of the lip wrinkles, or, you know, maybe I could do something about these jowls. And because I have the jowls too. And I'm not really very wrinkly. I haven't considered Botox because I don't have much in the way of wrinkles. So I just have, like, my face kind of sags a bit. And so I've looked at it and gone, oh, you know, maybe I could. But then I thought, just like you, I thought, well, then I wouldn't be me. And and maybe 20 years ago I'd be like, oh, that's awesome, I'd rather not be me. But now I'm quite happy to be me. And so I sort of think, well, if I'm, you know, I can still do all of the things that I do, and I can still have all the friends that I have, and I can still enjoy the things that I do with lip wrinkles as without. So I sort of think, well, I can deal with that.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, all of those things don't actually change who we are. We're still the same person, whether we have the big lips and the smooth skin or not. And for me, it's never been a priority. So yeah, I'd rather spend that money doing something that I don't know, like traveling or, you know, like going out for dinner with my friends or whatever. It's never really been a priority to me.
Yeah. I go between the two. I mean, I wear makeup. I'm a makeup wearer. So I'm not immune to trying to look better. and for my business posts on Instagram, I quite transparently use filters. For my personal posts, I tend not to, but I still do some of that kind of stuff. And so there is definitely an influence on me, and I am part of that in some way, and I'm aware of that. And it sort of has me thinking a lot. And this is why, you know, when you did that post, I was attuned to that particular thing, because I am aware of where I am in the age thing and where my looks are and all that kind of stuff. I'm quite aware of it, and I'm watching myself in the middle of it and observing what I'm doing and thinking about it and analysing it. And sometimes it's what I do might go against what my values are or what I want. So similar to you in your 30s, you know, you were dyeing your hair even though you kind of didn't want to. So it's the same with me. I'm using a filter even though I kind of don't want to. And so I'm kind of in that phase, and I don't know where I'll go with it, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. That's something that I have stopped doing. Was I found myself really relying on Instagram filters and, you know, for my stories and stuff. And then one day I just put it on normal, and I was like, oh my God, I'm actually shocked at how different I look with no filter. And so I just, you know, I made a commitment to myself not to rely so heavily on the filters myself, because it was affecting the way I was seeing me. You know, and seeing myself without a filter suddenly became something that was like, oh,
unpleasant.
You know,
yeah.
And you don't want it to be. No, and so I made a conscious choice to pause the filters for a bit, just so that I could, you know, like, I don't know,
recalibrate
when I meet, right, to recalibrate. Yeah, exactly, and to also, you know, for me, I want to make sure that my online presence is reflective of who I am if you were to run into me in the street, you know. Like sometimes you know, I live in Byron Bay, so or near Byron, and so there's a lot of celebrities and stuff here, and sometimes I'll be at the supermarket and I'll see someone and I'm like, oh, they look really familiar, who is that person? and it's just a person from TV who doesn't have any makeup on, and they look completely different, you know. Just like a regular person. And I wish we saw more of that instead of, you know, the really heavily made, you know, even like if you think about the way we see women in the media, not a lot of it is natural. I mean, it's all touched up and all that kind of jazz. So what we're seeing isn't real in some respects. And so it does set up some pretty unrealistic expectations of women.
Yeah, for sure. I know exactly what you mean. And I'm the same. And I had and it wasn't even, this was like pre-Instagram filters and everything. But so I was in a talk once, and these two women sort of said to me, and it was either at the beginning or at the end, I think it was at the beginning before I spoke, because I think it kind of rattled me a bit. I remember thinking about it while I was talking. But one of them said to me, well, you look really different from your headshot, like on your website or on the advertising materials or whatever. And I sort of said, oh, well, you know, that was a few years ago now, and my hair was shorter, so maybe that's it. And they're like looking at me with that, you know, that look, that consideration look, that perplexed look. No, they're thinking, no, that's not it. And then she said, maybe the light's just not really good in here. And I was like, right, so you've just called me ugly. And or intimated that I touch up my headshots with Photoshop, which that particular headshot, there was no Photoshop involved at all on my wrinkles. You can see my wrinkles very clearly. But yeah, I just found that really interesting. And for the rest of the talk, I was like, it was in the back of my mind all the time. It's like, okay, what was she saying? Like, what was she actually saying? And it was really interesting. Yeah, it's like, oh.
The things, the places our minds go when those kind of vague comments come our way. But I mean, I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like women, we really probably shouldn't be talking about our appearance so much.
Yes.
You know.
Yep.
I think that's half the problem. And it starts when we're kids, you know, look at that. Oh, she's so cute. Yeah. Oh, she's so adorable. Oh, you know, like we do place a lot of importance on little girls' looks and therefore young women. Like that was something that, you know, like my mum was very cautious of people saying, because I was quite a, you know, as a dancer, I was quite a lean, tall girl back then. You know, and a lot of people would say things like, oh, you know, oh, look at those legs. She could be a model kind of stuff. And that stuff does kind of, it does impact you. And, and like that actually isn't my greatest asset, is not my legs, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. Like our greatest asset isn't necessarily the way we look. In fact, it's not. I would argue that it's not the way we look. There's a lot more depth to a human than what's on the outside. And I think that was a big part of my, you know, my greatest, the greatest part of going grey has been for me letting go of those societal expectations, but also it's allowed me to grow more into who I really am. Like it was almost like the hair colouring, and this isn't the case for everyone, so I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush here, but for me it was a liberating experience because it was almost like the hair colour was part of a mask I was wearing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And so as the hair started to grow out, it was like not only an unveiling of my greyness, but also some other bits of me that had I'd been colouring, I guess, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I think that makeup is a bit like that for us as well. It is a mask that we wear.
It can be a mask, yeah.
Yeah, it can be. And it doesn't have to be either, like you said. It doesn't have to be. It can be an expression of creativity, or it can actually be the opposite, and it can reveal who you really are, you know, in a certain way as well. If that's, does that make sense? If that's
the intention. Yeah, 100%. I think the issue is when it becomes that thing that, like for me, the hair dye was something that really was covering up something. You know what I mean? Like I had wanted to be natural, but I had felt all this pressure to look a certain way, and dyeing my hair was a big part of that. And so I was, you know, so the no dye thing became a way of me releasing myself from some of the expectations that I'd felt, or some of the external pressure that I'd felt. And so for me, it was a really liberating experience. If you're colouring your hair, because that is a point of a way that you express yourself, and it's not to, you know, what I was doing was masking a part of me that I felt ashamed of. And I think that's where it becomes the issue, is when we're using makeup to hide something rather than you know, accentuate or express ourselves. I think the intention of its use and the purpose of our use of those kind of products is indicative of of our experience, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like you said, we can't. Not everybody's experience is the same, so we can't sort of say, oh, just because you like this other person that's listening right now, you are. Because you're not allowing yourself to look your natural hair colour, you're obviously masking something. That's not the case.
That's not the case.
But it could well be for some. And for those that it is, they're going to be hearing that right now. And they'll be hearing that message. They'll be like, they'll be nodding along, and they'll be going, I know exactly what you mean. And because it will be definitely doing that for some. And my mum, she has gone her natural hair colour this year. And it's been interesting because I haven't seen her since February, because she lives in Victoria. And because of COVID, we can't travel I'm in South Australia, so we can't travel into each other's states. And she has always been a redhead. So she was a redhead until she had me, and in her late 20s. And then her hair kind of went brown, and which was really interesting. And so she had it kind of a light brown, medium brown, sometimes a bit blonde for most of my childhood. And then later on in my teen and early adult years, she went red. actually it was in my 20s, she went back to red again. And she then dyed her hair red between the ages of at least 50 and 70, maybe earlier than 50. But she was, bright red for most of the time. And this year she has gone grey. And I haven't talked to her a lot about it, but she sent me a photo. We don't sort of FaceTime all that much. We talk normally just on the phone. So I haven't seen her a lot. But she sent me a picture early on, and when all of the red had gone, and it was amazing. Like she looked like a different person, but it didn't look bad at all. And I've always said to Mum that my favourite, like I love her in bright, vibrant red hair. So not kind of the darker red that she sometimes did, but like really bright orange. I loved it. It really suited her. And but the grey, she looks awesome. And she has said as well that apart from having to change, and I'm going to come to this and I'll ask you this in a minute, but apart from having to change a couple of her makeup colours, she said she's quite slipped into this quite easily, and it hasn't been as hard. But it took her until she was 70. Well, she's 70 to do that. Yeah, so it was a lot more years of maybe masking. I don't know. I have to talk to Mum and see whether she was masking, or she'll listen to this, so she'll tell me. But
hi, Mum.
Yeah. I'm always saying hi to Mum. Mum listens every Wednesday night. She goes to bed. She listens
I love
in bed.
that.
So
my mum would be too afraid to listen to one, I think.
Yeah,
she might listen to this one. But
yeah. Get her to listen.
But my own podcast, she's like, "Oh, you can just have that."
No, my mum listens, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. But for the most part, at least I know she's listening, so I can be careful what I say.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but yeah, so she did. So that's sort of it's something that so someone close to me, has also done that recently, and I've had lots of discussions with friends. I have a friend who is the same age as me, or the same age as you. She's a year older than me, and she has an Anglo-Indian background. She's very dark, and her hair is jet black, and she has decided to go grey naturally. And she doesn't have a great deal of grey, but there's definitely the silver coming through, and she's just like, what's the word? Reveling in it? That's not the right word. She's loving it. She's just I can't think of the right word, but she just loves it. And she said, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm really excited about this, and I love it. I love watching my hair change and my body change as I age, and it's amazing that we can sometimes really enjoy these things, and I'm looking forward to it as well. And as a blonde, it's definitely easier on me. Like the transition is going to be virtually seamless, so I don't have that sort of hanging over me like others would. So maybe that makes it easier for me to look forward to it. I don't know, probably.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I feel like that was a big thing for me, was like, once I commit to this, I have to be committed to it, because you can't really be a half and half head. Well, you can. I used to actually, back when I worked in radio, I had like the top half, all the top of my head was black hair, and then the bottom half I had bleached, and it was hot pink.
Oh, cool.
So you can have half and half hair, but like having a line straight across the head is it's kind of fashionable. I guess there are some musicians who do that kind of thing. But like it's one of those things that you then have to commit to, like where if you don't necessarily colour your hair that often, or you just have highlights, then it's a much easier transition because it's not a huge commitment. Where when you're fully coloured and you're a darker colour, it is a huge commitment because you're basically going to have to deal with the way that looks for about 18 months to 2 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
So it is. So that it is a big commitment.
So then, what would you recommend for people listening? That how can they make it not traumatic, or so a bit easier?
So, I mean, so I have this friend in the States, and she has wanted to go grey for the longest time. I would say she's probably in her mid to late 40s. She's been wanting to go grey for the longest time, but she's quite light. I'd say she's a medium brown, maybe to blondie. But she's so afraid of the transition. And so there are hairdressers who specialise in helping you transition, and they will dye your hair grey, and to slow, but it's a big financial commitment. I think like this particular woman lives in California, and it was going to cost her, I think the starting range was like $3,500 to $4,000. So huge financial commitment. I'm not for that at all. So, but I found the way that I did it quite, like, have some fun beforehand, lighten your hair, gradually lighten it would be one way you could do it. And then just kind of slowly let it go, or just like bite the bullet and embrace it, because it is a beautiful thing to watch your hair growing out. While it can be a bit abrasive, I guess, it's also a beautiful thing. So for me, it was just really about embracing where I'm at. And in fact, it became a talking point, right? Like while I was growing it out, people would want to talk to me about it. And and it's interesting because one of the words people use a lot is brave. And when it comes, and it just seems like such an arbitrary thing or a very strange thing to call me for like just my hair color.
Being natural, yeah. That word makes me mad a lot, actually, because when people say things like, oh yes, like she's so brave for wearing a bikini. I'm
I know.
Oh, you know what?
God.
Shut up with that, because
that's
like, to call it brave. The reason why people call it brave is because people will judge her,
right?
And it's got nothing to do with her bravery. It's not the problem. Like, it's not her courage that is the problem.
It's the problem here.
Yeah, the problem is
the view of her.
Yeah, exactly.
From the outside, that is the problem. She might be it's that's the thing. Like, I don't feel like a very brave person for having grey hair. I just have grey hair.
Yeah, you're just you. Yeah, you're authentic.
Yeah.
You're not brave. You're real,
Yeah.
And but yeah, that really makes me mad, that whole brave word, for lots of reasons. And but yeah, so the things that you were worried about, so the criticisms, or not criticisms, but the talk about going grey, like, oh, you're going to look older, and all of that kind of stuff. Now that you are grey, what are those thoughts mean now?
Oh, to me, they mean nothing. And in fact, I don't even think about it. I think I went bright red because I wanted to make a statement and really stand out, because I knew what was coming was potentially something that was a little bit controversial, which seems so weird for me to even say. But, so being red meant that, like, it was very hard not to notice me when you've got like super bright red artificial fire engine red hair. There was nothing natural about it at all, and it did stand out, right? Like you couldn't miss me in a crowd. And I think I did that purposely so that I would know the feeling of people looking at me due to my hair. And so when I went grey, it felt just easy for me, because actually I don't necessarily stand out. I have had no real negative comments about being grey from anyone else. All the people who were kind of on that train, I feel like it's kind of like this, right? When you have a baby, or you buy a dog or whatever, you can go through a phase of sharing your baby names with your friends, and your baby pre having the baby, and friends, before the child is here and you're sharing around the baby names, people have a lot of opinions on those baby names. They're like, oh, I don't really like Flora. Oh, don't know about that one, or whatever. They've got their shit, and they're not afraid to say it. And then you have the baby and you call it Flora, for example, and suddenly nobody really has anything to say. So I feel like it's kind of like that. Like when you're grey, you're just grey,
that makes sense.
Or you're just the baby called Flora, and no one's going to insult you, or some people probably would, but that those people aren't in my life. They may have some stuff to snigger around behind my back. It's not really any of my business what they think about me or my kid's name, right? Because it just exists. It is what it is. And so I don't find there's a lot of judgment, but I do get stopped a lot. Like I do get a lot of people commenting on my hair and, oh, wow, I've wanted to go grey myself and I haven't been brave enough or whatever it is. And I get a lot of, oh, but yours looks so great. Mine is all scraggly and uneven, and yours just looks so natural. And it's like, actually, like I said before, you've actually got no idea what it looks like until you've got it. Mine is very uneven, and it's actually what I think makes it beautiful. And it's natural, right? Like, so it is going to have unevenness.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well. What you did is you had gotten to a certain point of greyness before you allowed it to shine, whereas other people might be at different levels. So they might be like me, where they've got, they could count 20 grey hairs, and they might be growing, or they might have little grey patches in different places. And it's like, well, mine might have been like that 15 years ago or 10 years ago as well, but I didn't know it because I had it covered up all the time. So, you might just surprise yourself with how awesome it's actually going to look. And if you let it actually evolve, and you let it be, and you let it become what it is meant to be. And like you said, all of that uniqueness, like the patches of grey, they're really cool. I really love it when I can see a patch of grey. I think I saw one recently, a woman, I think she'd had one temple that was grey. And you could tell it was grey. She hadn't dyed it. I could tell because there were also patches that had spread sort of elsewhere. But this one, sort of, and I just thought, it was just lovely how she's just gone, cool, here it is, there it is, and I'm not going to hide that until the rest of my hair is grey. I'm just going to let it do its thing. So, that uniqueness is wonderful.
Totally. And I think if I had my time over, I would never have dyed in the first place. Like, I just would have allowed it to kind of
be.
Grow. Yeah. I have had friends who never dyed, and one of my friends is Sri Lankan, and it just grew in so beautifully. And
same as my friend.
And I just I wish I had given myself the opportunity to see that. And to grow into it. But, I still grew into it, just in a different way. But if I had my time over, I would ditch the shame that I'd felt about being grey and what I thought that meant. And I would have just allowed myself to naturally grow into it, and probably wouldn't have dyed my hair at all.
And so that shame that you were possibly anticipating, you now have hindsight. You can tell everybody now who is listening and who is worried about that shame that it actually doesn't exist for you at all.
No, well, I feel like shame only exists when we're trying to hide something, right? Like it's that classic thing. Shame can only really exist in the shadows. So once we bring it out into the light and expose it and be like, look, here it is, then we can't, like, shame can't exist in that space. So it's So for me, I think that's what's been most symbolic of it, is like just being like, hey, world, this is me. In all of my glory. And so that's been the gift of it, is just bringing it out from under the dye, and it's just allowed me to be free to be more me.
Yeah. Did you have to change anything? Like Mum said she had to change some of her makeup colours. Did you have to do anything like that? You don't wear a lot of makeup, but clothing-wise and...
No, I don't think so. I think...
Because Mum said her clothes didn't suit her anymore.
I feel like maybe some of mine haven't. Like those... like I used to wear... I always wore a lot of red, but then when I dyed my hair red, if it wasn't... Because my hair was a bluer... more a blood red than it was... that really orangey red.
Orange red.
And so all of those clothes that had orangey tinges in them, I had to kind of get rid of when I had the red hair. So, but I've always preferred those bluer kind of tones, and they tend to go with the red. Sorry, with the with the red and with the grey. So I didn't really have to change that much, except maybe get rid of a few, really brassy kind of colours. And I haven't changed any of my makeup or anything.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, I've never really been a makeup person anyway. And and so so I haven't really had to change anything, except
so there
maybe
hasn't been anything you're missing out
items.
on. You just so there's nothing to miss out on. It's just it's all winning. You've got less products in your shower. You're spending less at the supermarket. You're spending less at the. I just said supermarket, which just shows how much effort I put into buying hair products because I buy all mine at the supermarket. DIY girl strikes again. But so you're spending less. You're spending less at the hairdresser. You're spending less at the supermarket. You are more confident, or you're not necessarily more confident, but you're more authentic and you're more comfortable in your own skin. And so that's really what I wanted people to hear today, because I've been following you for a while, and I know, and because you have such an authentic style, and that's probably the one thing that's the one word that I think of first when I think of you, is that authenticity and that ability to not also take yourself too seriously, but that authenticity. And I think I wanted people to hear that there isn't anything wrong with being yourself, and that, you could consider if this is something that you have been wanting to do. And if you don't want to do it, then totally okay. But if you do want to do it and you need that little nudge or that little glimpse of the hindsight that someone else who's been through that has, then this is what I wanted to do today. So I think you've done that, and you've made me excited about going grey.
Right, exactly. And also, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be the hair. Like, we can unclutter the way we're showing up in the world, like there's lots of things about us personally as people that we are hiding from the world, and that leads to a lot of inner clutter. So finding ways to liberate yourself from yourself is the ultimate decluttering, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So, Karly, tell everyone how they can get to know you better.
So if you're listening to this, you're obviously a podcast listener, and I have a podcast called Karlosophies, which has been going for over 5 years, over 300 episodes, which is just mind-blowing to me. And basically I just walk on the beach and talk about whatever is kind of being raised in me at that point, some of my journey, some things that I'm witnessing. It's kind of like my philosophies on life. So that's called Karlosophies. And you can also find me on Instagram, where I do have a lot of fun, and you can see a lot of my grey hair there. And that's at Karlosophies as well.
Yep. And I follow Karly, and I do find that your stories are really interesting, and I laugh sometimes, and then other times I'm thinking, and it's like, and I have to go back and listen again. I'm like, well, that's interesting, because you have this way of talking about things that we think about in the back of our heads, and you kind of drag them out of yourself and spit them out and go, here, world, just dwell on this for a minute, and it's really good. I find it really good. You kind of, I think you can get the idea. Yeah, I'm just blabbering now. But so thank you so much, Karly. And I really found this interesting, and I'm sure that we're going to get some people reporting that they are, they're going to pull the pin now. They're going to, what are all of the cliches? Bite the bullet, all that kind of stuff.
Bite the bullet, rip the Band-Aid off.
Bite the bullet.
If you decide to, please let me know, like tag me, because I love watching people go grey. Yeah. It's one of my favourite things to do. There's some really great Instagram accounts that you can check out too if you are looking for inspo. One of them is Grombre. It's a really cool Instagram account where people just take photos of their own grey journey. So if you're looking for inspo, definitely check that one out. But if you do decide to bite the bullet, rip the Band-Aid off, whatever the cliche is, please get in touch. I'd love to hear.
And what we'll also do is invite you to join our Facebook community group, and then people can ask you questions directly and stuff like that as well. And
for sure.
They can see you and chat to you in person about their own concerns and maybe their own excitement about going on the journey themselves.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love it if you'd leave a review or tell all your friends about us so they too can be uncluttered. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us at beuncluttered.com.au or on social media or on our own websites at clearspace.net.au and basklifecoaching.com.